Captain Zexthul flexed his forearms as he studied the tactical display floating before him. The holographic representation showed a small human cargo vessel drifting through the asteroid field of the Kepler 442 system, completely unaware of the three pirate ships closing in on it from different angles. His crew of Vorthak raiders had been hunting this particular trade route for months, and today promised to be their most profitable haul yet. "Captain, the human vessel is broadcasting standard merchant identification codes," reported his tactical officer, a nervous Zelani whose scales flickered between green and yellow with excitement. "Manifest shows agricultural supplies and raw materials bound for the outer colonies." Zexthul's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Human cargo ships were always the best targets. The hairless primates from the third world of Sol were known throughout the galaxy for their complete lack of military prowess. Their home world was classified as a Deathworld by the Galactic Council. True enough. But that designation seemed laughably misapplied. Humans were soft, weak creatures who relied entirely on their crude technology to survive. They had no natural weapons, no armored hide, no venomous stingers. Just pink flesh stretched over fragile bones. "Any escort vessels detected?" Zexthul asked, though he already knew the answer. Humans were too cheap and too trusting to properly protect their merchant fleets. "Negative, Captain. The vessel appears to be traveling alone. Our intelligence was correct about their shipping patterns." The Vorthak captain's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. His species had evolved as pack hunters on a world where cunning and coordination meant the difference between eating and being eaten. Humans, by contrast, had supposedly evolved as persistence hunters on their death world, but Zexthul had never seen any evidence of this supposed hunting prowess. In every encounter he'd witnessed, humans either surrendered immediately or died quickly when they foolishly tried to resist. "Begin the approach, standard intimidation formation, signal the Storm Claw and Void Ripper to move into flanking positions." The three pirate vessels accelerated toward their prey, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that had been salvaged, stolen, or jury-rigged over decades of successful raids. Zexthul's flagship, the Bone Crusher, mounted enough firepower to crack open a small moon. The human cargo ship looked like a toy in comparison, a simple cylindrical hull with basic propulsion systems and what appeared to be minimal defensive capabilities. As they closed to weapons range, Zexthul opened a communication channel to the human vessel. The standard piracy protocol required at least one opportunity for surrender before opening fire. Not out of mercy, but because intact cargo was worth more than scattered debris. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human ship. A single figure sat in the captain's chair, a middle-aged human male with graying hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Merchant Marine. Behind him, Zexthul could see two other crew members, both human, working at their stations with remarkable composure, considering they were about to be boarded by pirates. "Human vessel, this is Captain Zexthul of the Bone Crusher. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded, or we will destroy your ship and take what we can from the wreckage." The human captain leaned back in his chair and actually smiled. It wasn't the terrified grimace Zexthul expected, but a genuine expression of amusement. "Well now, that's interesting. 3 ships for one little cargo hauler? You boys must be having a slow season." Zexthul's mandibles clicked in irritation. The human's casual tone was completely inappropriate for the situation. "You have 30 seconds to comply with our demands before we open fire." "Oh, I heard you just fine," the human replied, still smiling. "I'm just wondering if you fellows have proper salvage permits for this system. See, we humans are real sticklers for paperwork, and the Galactic Council gets mighty upset when people don't file their forms properly." The Vorthak captain's patience evaporated. This human was either insane or too stupid to understand the gravity of his situation. Fire warning shots across their bow. Maybe that will help them comprehend their circumstances. Energy beams lanced out from the Bone Crusher's secondary weapons, deliberately missing the human ship by mere meters. The brilliant blue plasma should have been more than enough to convince any rational being to surrender immediately. Instead, the human captain just nodded thoughtfully. Yep, definitely no permits. That's a real problem, boys. You see, this system is under Terran protection protocols, and we take a very dim view of unauthorized military activities in our space. Terran protection protocols? Zexthul laughed, the sound echoing through his bridge like grinding metal. Your pathetic world has no military worth mentioning. The galactic databases clearly show that Earth maintains only a token defense force for system patrol duties. Oh, those databases, the human said, his smile widening. Yeah, we might have been a little modest in our reporting. You know how it is, nobody likes to brag. Something about the human's tone made Zexthul uncomfortable, but he pushed the feeling aside. Humans were notorious for their tendency toward delusion and false bravado. Their psychological profiles indicated they often engaged in elaborate bluffs, even when facing certain death. Enough games. All ships, target their engines and weapon systems. Disable that vessel. The 3 pirate ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower more than sufficient to cripple any merchant vessel in the known galaxy. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and kinetic projectiles converged on the human ship from multiple angles. There was no possible way for such a small vessel to survive the barrage. But survive it did. The cargo ship's hull seemed to shimmer for an instant, and then the incoming fire simply vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed, but completely negated as if it had never existed at all. Zexthul stared at his tactical display in confusion. What happened? Did we miss? Negative, Captain. All weapons struck the target directly. Sensors show no damage to the human vessel. That's impossible. Run a full diagnostic on our targeting systems. While his crew scrambled to understand what had gone wrong, the human captain's voice crackled over the communication channel. Well, that was rude. We were having such a nice conversation, and then you had to go and shoot at us. That's going to require some paperwork. How? Zexthul demanded. How did you survive that attack? Our sensors show no shield emissions from your vessel. Oh, we don't use shields, the human replied casually. Shields are for species that haven't figured out proper defensive systems. See, when you evolve on a world where everything is actively trying to kill you, you learn to build things a little differently. The tactical display suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, materializing from what had seemed like empty space. Not just 1 or 2 vessels, but dozens. They ranged from sleek destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, each one bearing the distinctive angular lines of human military architecture. Captain, his tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. I'm reading 47 human warships. They just appeared. Our sensors detected nothing until this moment. Zexthul felt his blood turn to ice. The largest of the human ships was easily 3 times the size of his flagship, and the energy readings from its weapon systems were off the charts. How had an entire fleet remained hidden in an asteroid field? The human captain's image on the view screen was joined by another figure, this one wearing a military uniform with admiral's insignia. The new arrival was a human female with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to look right through Zexthul's soul. Captain Morrison, I take it these are our uninvited guests? The admiral asked. That's right, Admiral Chen. 3 ships, Vorthak design, flying pirate colors. They demanded we surrender and then opened fire when I asked to see their permits. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. And I suppose they're wondering how a simple cargo ship survived their attack. Among other things, yes, ma'am. The admiral turned her attention to Zexthul, and he instinctively took a step backward even though she was on a different ship entirely. Captain Zexthul, is it? I'm Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. You've just committed an act of piracy against a vessel under our protection. That's generally considered a poor life choice. This is impossible, Zexthul managed. Our intelligence clearly indicated that this was a standard merchant vessel traveling without escort. Oh, it is a standard merchant vessel, Admiral Chen confirmed. What your intelligence failed to account for is that all human ships, military and civilian, are built to the same basic specifications. See, when you come from a world where the weather can kill you, the local wildlife considers you a snack, and even the plants are often carnivorous. You tend to build everything as if your life depends on it. But our weapons had no effect at all. Adaptive armor plating, Captain Morrison explained helpfully. Standard on all human vessels larger than a shuttle. It analyzes incoming fire and restructures itself at the molecular level to counter each specific threat. Takes about 3 nanoseconds to adapt to any energy weapon, a bit longer for kinetic projectiles. Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The real question, Captain Zexthul, is what we're going to do with you and your crews. Piracy is a capital offense under both Terran and Galactic law. You can't just execute us. The Galactic Council has strict procedures for dealing with pirates. We have rights. Oh, you do indeed have rights, the Admiral agreed. The right to a fair trial, the right to legal representation, the right to appeal. All very civilized. But here's the thing about human justice systems, Captain. We learned a long time ago that the most effective deterrent to crime isn't the severity of the punishment, but the certainty of being caught. The tactical display updated again, showing more human ships emerging from concealment throughout the entire system. Not just warships, but sensor platforms, communication relays, and what appeared to be massive automated defense stations hidden within the asteroids themselves. How long? Zexthul asked weakly. How long have you been watching us? Your little pirate band has been operating in this system for approximately 4 months, Admiral Chen replied. We've been tracking your movements, documenting your crimes, and gathering evidence since your second raid. We could have stopped you at any time, but it was more efficient to let you continue until we could roll up your entire operation. But why? Why go to such elaborate lengths for a few pirate ships? The Admiral's expression grew cold. Because humans don't just defend themselves, Captain. We defend our friends. And every species you've victimized in this system has formal trade agreements with Earth. When you attack our partners, you attack us. Zexthul felt the weight of his situation settling on him like a crushing tide. His ships were hopelessly outgunned, surrounded by a fleet that had appeared from nowhere and trapped in a system that was apparently under complete human control. Surrender, he said quietly to his crew. All ships, power down weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Very wise, Admiral Chen said. Your cooperation will be noted during your trial. As human boarding parties prepared to take control of the pirate vessels, Zexthul couldn't stop staring at Captain Morrison's cargo ship. It looked exactly like any other human merchant vessel, completely unremarkable except for the fact that it had just shrugged off enough firepower to level a small city. Captain Morrison, he called out. That cargo ship of yours, what's its actual classification? The human merchant captain's grin returned. Officially, she's the transport vessel New Horizons, registered for general cargo duties. Unofficially? He paused for effect. She's what we call a Q-ship. Armed merchant cruiser, built to look like easy prey while packing enough firepower to take on a battle cruiser. How many weapons does she carry? Well now, that would be telling. But I will say this, Captain. If you'd actually managed to damage my ship, you would have discovered that human cargo vessels don't just carry goods. Sometimes they carry very large, very angry Marines who don't appreciate being shot at. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the conversation. Captain Zexthul, you asked earlier why human ships keep their firepower classified. The answer is simple. We learned long ago that the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. Every human ship, from the smallest courier to the largest freighter, is built to fight. We don't have the luxury of separating our military and civilian vessels because we come from a world that doesn't recognize the distinction between combatant and non-combatant. Your planet made you into warriors, Zexthul said, finally understanding. No, Captain. Our planet made us into survivors. There's a difference. The detention cell aboard the human dreadnought was unlike anything Zexthul had expected. Instead of the cramped, hostile environment he'd anticipated, he found himself in a space that was almost comfortable. The walls were a soft gray color, there was adequate lighting, and he even had access to a small terminal for entertainment and communication. It was disturbingly civilized for a prison cell. 3 days had passed since his capture, and Zexthul had spent most of that time trying to understand how completely he had misjudged human capabilities. The official debriefing sessions with Admiral Chen had been educational in ways he'd never intended. The problem with galactic intelligence networks, Admiral Chen had explained during their first interview, is that they rely too heavily on self-reported data. When the Terran Republic joined the Galactic Council, we were asked to provide detailed specifications for our military capabilities. We complied, of course. We just didn't mention that the specifications we submitted were for our training vessels. Now, as Zexthul sat in his cell reviewing the evidence files he'd been given access to, the scope of the deception was becoming clear. Human ships weren't just more heavily armed than their official classifications suggested. They were operating with technology that shouldn't have been possible for a species that had only achieved spaceflight within the last few centuries. The cell door chimed softly, and Captain Morrison entered carrying 2 cups of what appeared to be human coffee. The merchant captain had visited several times over the past few days, apparently out of genuine curiosity about Vorthak culture and piracy in general. "Afternoon, Captain," Morrison said cheerfully, offering one of the cups. "Thought you might like something hot to drink. This stuff's from my personal stash, imported directly from the Colombian highlands on Earth." Zexthul accepted the cup gratefully. The coffee was actually quite good, though he'd never admit it aloud. "Captain Morrison, I've been reviewing the files your admiral provided. Your ship, the New Horizons, is listed as carrying 47 different types of concealed weapon systems. 48, actually. The files don't mention the emergency plasma caster in the cargo bay. That one's a recent addition. How is such a thing possible? The power requirements alone should make it impossible to hide that kind of firepower on a vessel that size." Morrison settled into the chair across from Zexthul, his expression becoming more serious. "You really want to understand? It's going to require some background about human engineering philosophy." Zexthul nodded eagerly. Understanding his captors had become something of an obsession over the past few days. "Right then. See, most spacefaring species approach ship design from the perspective of specialization. You build cargo haulers for carrying goods, warships for fighting, research vessels for exploration. Each type is optimized for its specific function. That's logical. Specialization increases efficiency. True, but it also creates vulnerabilities. When humans started designing our first interstellar vessels, we had to account for a basic fact about our species. We're paranoid." Morrison took a sip of his coffee and grinned. "I mean that in the best possible way. Humans assume that everything that can go wrong will go wrong, usually at the worst possible time. So you over-engineer everything." "Not over-engineer. We engineer for reality. See, Earth isn't just dangerous because of the wildlife and weather. It's dangerous because danger can come from anywhere at any time. A cargo ship hauling grain might suddenly need to defend itself against pirates. A research vessel studying nebula formations might encounter hostile aliens. A colony transport might find itself in the middle of a war zone." Zexthul thought about this. "So you design every ship as if it might need to fight." "Exactly. But more than that, We design every ship as if it might need to fight alone, without support, against superior odds. Morrison leaned forward, his expression intense. Do you know what the most common cause of death on Earth was for most of human history? Disease? Other humans. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, and we got very, very good at it. When we finally achieved spaceflight and discovered we weren't alone in the galaxy, our first instinct wasn't to assume everyone would be friendly. Our first instinct was to prepare for war. The Vorthak captain felt a chill run through his body. Your entire civilization is built around the assumption of conflict. Not conflict, survival. There's a difference. We don't go looking for fights, but we're always ready for them. Every human child learns basic self-defense. Every human ship carries enough firepower to defend itself. Every human colony is designed to be self-sufficient in case supply lines are cut. Morrison stood and walked to the small viewport in the cell wall. Outside, Zexthul could see other ships in the human fleet conducting what appeared to be routine patrol operations. Want to know something interesting? That dreadnought you're being held on? Officially, it's classified as a deep space exploration vessel. That's impossible. I've seen the weapon emplacements. Oh, it absolutely is an exploration vessel. It's designed to venture into unknown regions of space, study new phenomena, make contact with alien species, and establish forward bases for colonization efforts. The fact that it can also reduce a planet to molten slag is just a bonus feature. Zexthul stood and joined Morrison at the viewport. The massive ship was indeed conducting scientific operations. Sensor arrays extended from its hull like metallic flowers, and small research craft were moving between it and several asteroids. But he could also see the weapon batteries, the launch bays for fighter craft, and the heavily armored sections that clearly contained military systems. How do you hide the power signatures? Our sensors should have detected the energy outputs from those weapons. Ah, now that's the clever bit, Morrison said with obvious pride. Human ships don't have separate power systems for weapons and civilian operations. Everything runs off the same core. When we need to fire the main guns, we just redirect power from life support, artificial gravity, and propulsion. Fight fast, fight hard, and hope you don't need to do it for very long. That seems extremely risky. It is. But it also means our power signatures look completely normal, right up until the moment we start shooting. By then, it's usually too late for the other guy to do anything about it. A soft chime announced another visitor, and Admiral Chen entered the cell. She nodded politely to both men before taking a seat. Captain Zexthul, I've reviewed your case with the Judge Advocate General. Your cooperation has been noted, and we're prepared to offer you a plea arrangement. Zexthul felt a surge of hope. What kind of arrangement? Full disclosure of your pirate network's operations, locations of hidden bases, identification of fence operations for stolen goods, and testimony against your fellow pirates in exchange for a reduced sentence and possible relocation to a minimum security facility. What's the alternative? Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral. Trial by military tribunal on 47 counts of piracy, 16 counts of assault, 8 counts of murder, and 1 count of terrorism. If convicted, the sentence would be life imprisonment on a penal colony. The choice was obvious, but Zexthul found himself hesitating. Admiral, may I ask you something? Of course. How long have humans been planning this? Not just the operation to capture my crew, but the entire deception about your military capabilities? Admiral Chen exchanged a glance with Morrison before answering. Since before we joined the Galactic Council, the decision was made at the highest levels of our government that Earth's true defensive capabilities should remain classified indefinitely. But why? Surely displaying your strength would deter aggression more effectively than hiding it. Captain, let me tell you a story about human military history, the Admiral said. Several centuries ago, there was a nation on Earth called Switzerland. Small country, mountainous terrain, surrounded by much larger and more aggressive neighbors. For most of its existence, Switzerland maintained strict neutrality in conflicts. A peaceful nation, then? Hardly. Switzerland survived by making itself too expensive to conquer. Every citizen was a trained soldier, every bridge and tunnel was rigged with explosives, every mountain pass was a potential killing ground. They didn't advertise their defensive capabilities, but everyone understood that invading Switzerland would cost far more than it could possibly be worth. Morrison nodded. That's the human approach to galactic relations. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule anyone. We just want to be left alone to trade and explore in peace. But if someone decides to threaten us or our allies, we want them to discover that they've made a very expensive mistake. You're saying that Earth is prepared to fight the entire galaxy if necessary. We're saying that Earth is prepared to make any potential aggressor pay such a high price for their ambitions that they'll decide to look elsewhere for easier targets, Admiral Chen corrected. The best war is the one you never have to fight because your enemies decide it's not worth the cost. Zexthul thought about the implications. How many other species know the truth about human capabilities? A few of our closest allies have been briefed on some aspects of our defensive systems. Most of the galaxy continues to believe that humans are relatively weak and pacifistic. We prefer it that way. What about the Galactic Council? Surely they must suspect something. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. The Council is primarily concerned with maintaining trade stability and preventing large-scale conflicts. As long as humans continue to comply with galactic law, pay our membership dues, and avoid causing diplomatic incidents, they're happy to accept our official reports at face value. But what happens when the truth eventually comes out? Surely this deception cannot be maintained indefinitely. Morrison and Admiral Chen exchanged another look before the Admiral spoke. Captain, you're assuming that we're the only species practicing this kind of strategic deception. The galaxy is full of civilizations that prefer to keep their true capabilities hidden. The Krolix Empire officially maintains only a small defensive fleet, but our intelligence suggests they could field 1,000 battle groups within 6 months if threatened. The Etherian Collective claims to be a peaceful trading confederation, but they've developed biotechnology that could wipe out entire ecosystems. Everyone is lying about their military strength? Not lying. Being strategically modest. The species that survive and prosper in this galaxy are the ones that manage to appear both harmless enough to avoid being targeted and dangerous enough to discourage casual aggression. It's a delicate balance. Zexthul sat down heavily, the weight of revelation pressing down on him. His entire worldview had been based on incomplete information. The galaxy wasn't a place where weak species were naturally preyed upon by strong ones. It was a complex web of deterrence and deception where apparent weakness might mask devastating strength. Admiral, if I accept your plea arrangement, what happens to my crew? They'll be offered similar deals based on their individual levels of involvement. Your tactical officer will probably face reduced charges since he was following orders. Your weapons specialist, on the other hand, has a history of unnecessary violence that will work against him. And the other pirate groups operating in this region? We've been building cases against all of them. Within the next 6 months, we expect to have eliminated piracy in this sector entirely. Not through massive military operations, but through careful intelligence gathering and coordinated law enforcement actions. Morrison stood up and walked toward the door. Captain Zexthul, I need to get back to my ship. We're due to depart for the Centauri colonies tomorrow with a cargo of medical supplies, but I wanted to leave you with one final thought. What's that? The next time you're thinking about attacking what looks like a helpless human cargo ship, remember that humans don't believe in helpless. We believe in prepared. After Morrison left, Admiral Chen remained behind to finalize the details of the plea arrangement. But Zexthul's mind was elsewhere. thinking about all the intelligence reports his organization had relied on, all the assumptions they'd made about human capabilities, and all the other species in the galaxy who might not be what they appeared to be. The universe had suddenly become a much more dangerous and complicated place, and somewhere out there, other pirates were probably making the same mistakes he had made, assuming that appearances told the whole story. He almost felt sorry for them. Almost. 6 months later, Zexthul stood in the observation deck of the minimum security facility on Kepler Prime, watching human cargo ships move through the system's shipping lanes. The plea arrangement had worked out better than he'd hoped. His cooperation had helped the Terran Defense Fleet dismantle 3 major pirate networks, and in return, he'd been given a relatively comfortable imprisonment with opportunities for education and eventual rehabilitation. The facility itself was another example of human engineering philosophy. Officially, it was a correctional institution for nonviolent offenders. In reality, Zexthul had discovered that the entire complex was built like a fortress, complete with concealed defensive systems that could turn the pastoral-looking buildings into hardened bunkers within minutes of an alarm. Still studying our ships? Zexthul turned to see Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the human xenopsychologists assigned to work with alien prisoners. Over the months, she had become something of a friend, helping him understand not just human technology, but human thinking. "I find them fascinating," he admitted. "Every day I see vessels that look identical to the cargo ship that captured me, and every day I wonder what they're really carrying." Dr. Kim joined him at the observation window. "Want to know a secret? Most of them are carrying exactly what their manifests say they're carrying: agricultural products, manufactured goods, raw materials for the outer colonies. The weapon systems are there, but they're not the primary purpose." "How can you be sure?" "Because that's how human psychology works. We prepare for the worst-case scenario, but we hope for the best-case outcome." Captain Morrison wasn't hunting pirates when you attacked him. He was genuinely trying to deliver medical supplies to a colony that needed them. The fact that he could defend himself was just good planning. Zexthul watched a particularly large cargo vessel maneuver toward the docking station. According to the identification transponder, it was the merchant ship Golden Dawn, registered for agricultural transport. But now that he knew what to look for, he could see the subtle signs. The hull was slightly too thick for a standard cargo hauler. The drive section was oversized for the ship's apparent mass. The sensor arrays were more sophisticated than necessary for civilian navigation. "Dr. Kim, may I ask you something about human history?" "Of course." "Captain Morrison mentioned that the most common cause of death on Earth was other humans. How did your species ever achieve civilization if you were constantly fighting each other?" Dr. Kim was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "That's actually the key to understanding humanity, Zexthul. We didn't achieve civilization despite our violent tendencies. We achieved it because of them." "I don't understand." "Competition drove innovation. The need to defend ourselves forced us to develop better tools, better strategies, better cooperation. The tribes that survived were the ones that could work together most effectively when threatened by outsiders. War taught us the value of peace, and peace gave us the opportunity to prepare for the next war." A cycle of conflict and preparation. Exactly. But here's the important part. Over time, we learned to channel that competitive drive into non-destructive pursuits. Sports, business, scientific research, exploration. We still compete with each other constantly, but now we compete to see who can build the best starship, or discover the most interesting new world, or develop the most effective medical treatment. Zexthul thought about this. "So when humans joined the Galactic Council, you brought that same competitive mindset to interstellar relations." "In a sense, yes, but we also brought something else. The understanding that the best way to win a competition is to make sure everyone benefits from playing. Earth doesn't want to dominate the galaxy. We want to be so valuable as allies and so dangerous as enemies that everyone chooses to work with us instead of against us." A soft chime indicated an incoming message on the facility's communication system. Dr. Kim checked her tablet and frowned slightly. "What is it?" Zexthul asked. "Interesting news from the Galactic Council. The hegemony of Skor has officially requested Terran military assistance for their border dispute with the Zelnan Collective." Zexthul felt his blood chill. The Skorans were one of the most aggressive military powers in the galaxy, with a fleet that could challenge any known force. If they were asking for human help, it suggested their situation was more serious than public reports indicated. Will Earth accept? Unknown. But if we do, it'll be the first time human military forces operate openly alongside an alien fleet. No more hiding our capabilities. The implications were staggering. Once humanity revealed its true military strength, the entire balance of galactic politics would shift. Some species would undoubtedly feel betrayed by the deception. Others would scramble to secure alliances with Earth before it was too late. And still others would probably decide that humans had become too dangerous to be allowed to continue their expansion unchecked. "Dr. Kim, what happens to people like me when the truth comes out? Former pirates who know about human capabilities? That depends entirely on what you do with the knowledge. The Terran Republic doesn't believe in silencing people permanently, but we also don't tolerate threats to our security. You've been cooperative so far, which has earned you considerable goodwill." Over the following days, news trickled in about the developing crisis in Skoran space. The Zelnan Collective had apparently developed some kind of new weapon technology that rendered traditional shields useless. 3 Skoran battle fleets had been destroyed in as many weeks, and their remaining forces were falling back toward their core systems. The official human response came a week later, delivered by Admiral Chen herself in a broadcast to the Galactic Council. Zexthul watched from the facility's common area, surrounded by dozens of other alien prisoners who had become equally fascinated by human affairs. "The Terran Republic has agreed to provide military assistance to the hegemony of Skor," Admiral Chen announced. "Effective immediately, a joint human Skoran task force will be deployed to counter the Zelnan threat and restore stability to the region." The broadcast included footage of human warships emerging from what had appeared to be civilian shipyards around Earth. Not just the exploration vessels and disguised cargo ships Zexthul had seen before, but massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Skoran fleet. Ships that clearly had no purpose other than warfare, armed with weapon systems that looked like they could crack planets. "How long?" asked Veltar, a Romulan smuggler who had been captured in the same sweep as Zexthul's crew. "How long have they been building those ships?" "Since before they joined the Council," Dr. Kim replied. She had joined the prisoners to watch the broadcast, apparently as curious about the official human response as they were. "The shipyards around Earth and Mars have been operating at full capacity for decades. We've just been very careful about what we allow to be seen by outside observers." The footage continued, showing human ships that were clearly designed around completely different principles than anything else in the galaxy. Instead of the elegant curves preferred by most species, human warships were angular, brutal-looking things that seemed to prioritize function over form. They bristled with armor plating, weapon emplacements, and sensor arrays that spoke to a military doctrine based on overwhelming firepower and comprehensive situational awareness. "But the power requirements," protested Keth Moran, a former weapons dealer who had supplied several pirate organizations. "Ships that size would need fusion cores the size of small buildings. The energy signatures should be visible from halfway across the system." "They are," Dr. Kim said calmly. "We just hide them inside the energy signatures of our civilian infrastructure. Every human colony is built around massive fusion generators that provide power for industrial operations." Our warships dock at civilian stations and use external power sources until they're ready to deploy. When they go active, their signatures look like industrial accidents until it's too late to matter. Zexthul realized he was witnessing the end of an era. For generations, the galaxy had operated under certain assumptions about the relative strength of different species. Humans had been considered a minor power, useful for trade and exploration, but irrelevant to major military conflicts. That perception was about to change permanently. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we find out whether our strategy of peaceful strength works on a galactic scale," Dr. Kim replied. "The Terran Republic is about to become either the galaxy's most valuable ally or its most dangerous enemy. Which one depends entirely on how other species choose to react." The broadcast ended with Admiral Chen making a direct statement to the Galactic Council. "The Terran Republic has no territorial ambitions beyond our current borders. We have no desire to impose our government, our culture, or our values on other species. But we will defend our allies, we will protect our trade routes, and we will respond to any threat against human civilians with appropriate force." It was a carefully worded declaration that managed to be both reassuring and threatening at the same time. Humans were offering partnership to those who wanted it and promising destruction to those who chose hostility. 3 days later, news arrived that the Joint Human-Scoran Task Force had encountered the Zelnan fleet near the Vega system. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Zelnan ships were completely destroyed, their new weapon technology proving ineffective against human adaptive defenses. Not a single human or Scoran vessel was lost. The demonstration of overwhelming military superiority sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Within hours, a dozen species that had never shown interest in human affairs were requesting diplomatic meetings. Trade agreements that had been stalled in negotiation for years were suddenly fast-tracked to completion, and 3 minor powers that had been showing signs of aggressive expansion immediately announced their commitment to peaceful development. Zexthul found himself oddly proud of his former captors. They had achieved exactly what they'd claimed to want: a galaxy where cooperation was more profitable than conflict, and where potential aggressors understood the cost of their ambitions. "So what happens to former pirates like us?" Veltar asked during their evening discussion group. "That depends on what kind of galaxy we help build," Zexthul replied. "Humans seem to believe in redemption and second chances, but they also believe in consequences for actions. We made our choices, and now we live with the results." Dr. Kim, who had joined their discussion, nodded approvingly. "The Terran Republic has a saying, 'The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior,' unless someone makes a deliberate choice to change. You're all being given the opportunity to demonstrate that change." As Zexthul looked out at the shipping lanes where human vessels continued their seemingly routine commercial operations, he realized that the galaxy would never again make the mistake of judging human capabilities by appearance. The age of human deception was ending, but the age of human influence was just beginning. And somewhere out there, on worlds throughout the galaxy, other species were probably having their own moments of revelation about the nature of strength, the value of preparation, and the wisdom of never assuming that what you see is all there is. The universe had become a more honest place, but also a more complicated one. And for former pirates like himself, that meant the game had changed forever. The question now was whether they were smart enough to learn the new rules before it was too late.